Welcome to this bonus episode of Taking the Edge Off the Middle East. This podcast is a series of casual conversations that offer up rare insider knowledge about the most important events in the broader Middle East and why it all matters to America today. I'm Brian Katulis. I'm host of the program and senior fellow here at the Middle East Institute. And today I'm joined by my friend Faisal Abbas, who's editor-in-chief of Arab News, the Riyadh-based Middle East English language daily. Faisal, welcome to MEI. Let's take some edge off the Middle East.
Pleasure to be with you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. So before we start our conversation, Faisal, I want to offer a personal note to the audience and a dedication of this episode to my father, Jack Katulis, who passed away last week on Veterans Day. I raise this for three reasons. One, a very practical reason. I don't have many listeners. I need more listeners. And I've just lost a listener. So if you're listening to this podcast, tell a friend. We need more listeners. Tell them it's really good and interesting. Second, my dad really loved it in part because what we're trying to do in doing this, in taking the edge off the Middle East, is offer a friendly tone and the spirit, the ethos that he lived his life. He was a guy that when he went for runs in foreign cities and he would wave to people and smile, and it cheered him so much that so many people would smile back and be friendly. And that's what we're trying to do here. And he also loved the fact that we have friendly conversations with really substantive experts, people who know different parts of the world, like you, Faisal. And I'm so glad you're here to join us in this special conversation that I dedicate to my father, Jack Katulis.
If I may interject just quickly there. First of all, my sincere condolences. I am very sorry for your loss. And at least he went away, I'm sure, feeling very proud. And for me, I just say hats off, because I don't know many people who bounce back straight back to work. And, we almost canceled this because of the circumstances. So hats off to you, condolences. But not too many people I know can say that their parents left feeling so proud. So I'm quite sure he left feeling very proud.
Thanks for that. And really, he's, it's not bounced back yet. It's still tough times, but we do what we can to carry on and do 100%. The things that we love to do. 100%. So let's start with the basics. You're from where?
So I'm from a city in Saudi Arabia called Jeddah.
Yes.
On the Red Sea, on the west coast.
Yes.
Beautiful, nice place. I am not based there anymore now. I'm based in the capital, Riyadh city, where I edit a newspaper called Arab News.
Yeah.
But I do visit occasionally, and it is the point of entry of millions of Muslims who come to for pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. So many people around the world would be would be familiar with the port of Jeddah.
Great. So you're from this magical country called Saudi Arabia, born in Jeddah, living in the capital city, Riyadh.
Actually, I was born in Beirut.
You were born in Beirut? Oh, how'd that come to be?
Well, my mother happened to be there, and when you need to give birth, you need to give both.
Yeah, you gotta do it wherever you can.
Can't really choice.
Yeah, not a choice. So were you an anchor baby in Lebanon? Are you a Lebanese citizen now?
No.
Okay, I don't know what the rules are.
I am a Saudi citizen.
Yeah, great. So, but Saudi Arabia, you're 43 years old. We were talking about this, 10 years younger than I am. Tell us about Saudi Arabia today. Yeah, I know you come back and forth to America. You studied in Britain as well, and
yes,
you're a worldly man. You're part of this period of globalization. How has Saudi Arabia in your lifetime, and in particular the last 10 years, changed?
First, I'm glad that you pointed out that I'm 10 years younger. I know I look 10 years older, but that it's good to know. You need to give me the secrets later. Saudi Arabia is sometimes a victim of its own significance and of its own weight. First of all, what people need to know is Saudi Arabia geographically is the size of Western Europe put together.
Wow.
So it's a country the size of a continent. And it is as diverse as much as you can stretch that understanding of the sentence. I'm talking seaside, I'm talking mountains, I'm talking desert. In some areas it's extremely hot, in some areas it snows. So it's a very diverse country. The people in Saudi Arabia are from different parts of the world, especially in my in my city of Jeddah.
Right.
Because of the pilgrimage angle I mentioned earlier. you will find that people in the western region of Saudi Arabia often originate from different parts of the world. So you'll find black Saudis, you will find Caucasian Saudis.
Uh-huh.
In my case, you asked me if I was Lebanese. I am not. I'm of Lebanese origin.
Yeah.
So my family migrated from Lebanon a long time ago and became Saudis. You will find even Asian Saudis.
Right.
So one of my distinguished colleagues actually is called Uthman As-Sini. He's one of the editors-in-chief of Saudi Arabia. And his name literally means Uthman the Chinese.
Yes, yeah.
And he actually looks Chinese to the point that once we went to Japan, people started talking to him in Japanese.
Wow.
Because they assumed he's Japanese, but he's very Saudi. So that's how diverse the country and the people are.
That's right.
Now, as we are in the Middle East Institute, let's go a little bit into the geopolitical and economical aspect.
Right.
So not only is Saudi Arabia important due to its size and its religious significance. I mean, religious significance. I don't think I need to remind your audience that it is the land of the two holy mosques, the two holy shrines of Islam.
Yeah.
But it's also the world's key player when it comes to the oil markets. Maybe it's also worthwhile to say that 90 years ago, a bunch of American explorers went, and because of them, something called Aramco was established. And Aramco stands for the Arab American Company. That company ended up being the biggest oil company in the world, and has helped put Saudi Arabia among the world's wealthiest countries because of that partnership.
It's a member of the G20, right? It's
It is the only Arab country in the G20, and we that wealth that generated has also helped transform the country very quickly, as quickly as money can buy development and infrastructure. So I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a superpower, but in terms of the region, it is the dominant geopolitical, economical power. Not to take anything away from our neighboring countries, but size does matter. And significance. In this case, it's the combination of religious, political, social, and economical significance that makes Saudi Arabia stand apart from other countries in the region.
So there's a huge social transformation going on. And let me tell you a story from one of my visits. I've been going to Saudi Arabia for years, and I've been thinking about things in 10-year periods recently for a variety of reasons. But since 2015, and when I was there in 2015, and when I go back these days, it's like night and day. But the story I like to tell comes from 2019, and I visited with our colleague Daniel Benaim, who's a senior fellow here, and a few other colleagues. We met with ministers, with top officials, with the defense ministry. But the most interesting meeting was at the education ministry. And this is in 2019, in the middle of Vision 2030, which we'll talk about. And there was a bevy of leaders, not just the minister. Like when you used to go to Saudi Arabia, but way back when, you'd meet with the minister and it would be stiff talking points and you wouldn't get much out of it as a researcher, frankly. This was a very vibrant conversation about what? Curriculum reform inside of Saudi Arabia, and how do you balance sort of the social tendencies inside the society? On the one hand, a new generation that was open to a lot of the new music, media, film, comedians we were talking about that have come, versus some of the still traditional bases inside of maybe more conservative areas in Saudi Arabia, and a very thoughtful conversation of how do you actually educate the next generation to give them the skills, but also keep them anchored in the traditional values of Saudi Arabia. You've been part of this as somebody in your 30s and now early 40s as this transformation's unfolded. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I am very lucky, actually, to have been chosen to be editor-in-chief back in 2016, so almost 10 years. 10 years on the job. So my appointment coincided with the start of what we call Vision 2030. For those who don't know what Vision 2030 is, it's the kind of master plan, it's the blueprint of how Saudi Arabia intends to diversify its economy, sway itself away from its dependence on oil, which, as I said, has generated a lot of wealth, but it is a scarce resource, and the leadership has decided that we cannot be a one-trick pony. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, given the geographical space that we have, I think one thing our crown prince continuously repeats in private, that for so many years we've been operating on 10% of our capacity. He is after the 90%, and that 90% means things as soft as travel and tourism, and that has been a tremendous success, unexpected. We've just hit the 100 million tourists mark about 2 years ago.
And that's not just religious tourists.
No, that is a combination of all together, and that was the target for 2030. So obviously that took everybody by surprise, because if you had asked people 10 years ago, where does Saudi Arabia rank on their bucket list, unless you are going there for religious tourism, people didn't really have a reason to go.
Yeah.
Now people go for religious purposes, for pilgrimage. People go to attend, the world's best concerts, comedy shows, what we call football, or you call soccer.
Yeah.
We have some of the world's biggest stars now playing in the Saudi football league or soccer league, including Cristiano Ronaldo, who was here at the White House a few days ago.
You have WrestleMania coming to Saudi Arabia, WWE. Amazing.
Yeah. So WrestleMania for the first time will be held. We did work with the WWE to create a bespoke product called Crown Jewel. But obviously, as we are an ambitious country, we went the best of the best. So, and it doesn't get bigger than WrestleMania. I will get to it in a second, because I have particular memories watching wrestling, and I'm going to talk to you about American culture in a second. But when I was talking about diversification, I mean, the diversification of the economy can go from things as soft as travel and tourism to things as solid or as deep as mining. For example, massive amounts of lithium were discovered in Saudi Arabia and announced. And lithium, as you know, is very important when we talk about electrical batteries.
Right.
We are talking about nuclear energy now, and there are talks between the Saudi Arabian and the American government to recreate the Aramco success story I referenced earlier when it comes to nuclear energy.
Right. Yeah.
We are talking about things as sophisticated as artificial intelligence and technology. And there is a huge potential for Saudi-US cooperation on that front, given that you guys have the know-how, and we have the world's lowest cost of production of energy anywhere in the world. If I'm not mistaken, I think each barrel of oil costs us around $2 or $3 only.
Right.
And that is the lowest in the world. We also have huge amounts of space that could be used for data centers.
Right. We need a lot of that. Yeah.
And of course, 70% of the population is less than 30 years old. So we have a very young, dynamic population.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is the basis of the U.S.-Saudi relationship, which was grounded in oil for security, oil for guns. What we're seeing is this mass diversification of your economy, but then also the potential for diversifying the bilateral relationship for a number of win-wins, right? And we're going to talk about this visit you were a part of, and you here for at least, and had a front row seat. But that's what we're seeing right now, right?
Yes. I mean, it's a very old prism, oil for security, and it was accurate at some point. But as the country diversifies its economy, it's all of the above, all of what I've mentioned before, and the United States being, the partner of choice, can be, the partner that will make all of this happen if they choose to be. And what we're seeing today is a president, and I'm very cautious. I'm very conscious of the criticisms he has here internally.
Yeah.
But the way we look at it is, this is a man that means business. That is a man that will not allow anything bureaucracy to get in the way of making America great again, in the sense of creating jobs, helping industries thrive here.
Yeah.
And this is good for us, because with America or without America, Vision 2030 is happening. And if it's not American companies that are taking these contracts, they will be given to other countries.
Yeah, we're going to get into why you still see America as the preferred strategic partner choice in a little bit. But we're doing this bonus episode this week because you had a front row seat for this visit, for His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to the White House, and also this investment business conference at the Kennedy Center. And before the visit, in Arab News, you published this really interesting article. And if you're not reading, Faisal, you're not really understanding what people are thinking inside of Saudi Arabia, for reals, on a range of issues. And we're going to talk about many of those issues. In this article, you said that this visit, you set the bar pretty high. You reminded everybody that it had been 80 years since Franklin Delano Roosevelt met King Abdulaziz back in 1945, and really set the framework for an 80-year relationship that had its ups and downs, but more or less had been mutually beneficial to the two countries. What you argue in this article is that this visit this week could set the trajectory for the next 80 years. I know it's still too soon. There's a lot of work and a lot of follow-up. Did this visit meet your expectations in terms of setting that framework for the next 80 years?
100%. It exceeded my expectations, to be honest. But yes, so the similarities or the parallels couldn't be any more similar. When King Abdulaziz, the founder of modern-day Saudi Arabia, the unifier of Saudi Arabia, met President FDR in 1945, they set the course of what would become a very successful relationship. Like any two countries, we've had our ups and downs. But over the past 80 years, we've seen the two countries working together to stabilize energy prices, to combat communism, to combat terrorism. In the next 80 years, we could see, and we are beginning to see, under the current leadership in Saudi Arabia, and with President Trump, you might have seen recently or during the visit that he mentioned that the Crown Prince brought up the war in Sudan.
Right, yeah.
And that the United States will work with Saudi Arabia to try to end that war. We've seen Saudi Arabia work with the United States to lift the sanctions over Syria now that the horrible regime of Bashar al-Assad and his family have been overthrown. Which is good, because no average citizen, no child or mother or civilian should have to pay the price of the atrocities that are committed by a political regime which they had no say.
Looking on Syria, it's my view that Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudis were pivotal in convincing Donald Trump, who, when he was president-elect during the transition and al-Shara and others came to power in December of last year, he and J.D. Vance, as vice president-elect at the time, said we should just stay the hell out. But on the eve of his visit in May to Saudi Arabia, I think the quiet discussions, the groundwork that was laid by the foreign minister, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal, when he came here the month before that visit, there was a campaign to convince the Trump administration that Syria was pivotal. And Saudi Arabia saw this as an opportunity strategically to actually make the state system, the weak state system, the fragile state system of the Middle East stronger in supporting Syria and convincing Trump to lift sanctions and also meet with al-Shara.
100%. Look, I wasn't privy to that conversation, but knowing the characters involved, I can imagine how it went. It would have went something like this. Yes, you have the humanitarian aspect of it, but governments are not charities. Yes, governments should do the ethical thing. Governments should have a heart and understand that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of refugees. Almost half of the country is out of the country. They're living in stark poverty. There's been a regime that's been robbing the country of its wealth, and people have been living in horrible conditions. Yes, that is one argument. But there's also another argument. You have a golden opportunity to turn a country that was a pariah, a country that was working very closely. In fact, the only friends of the former regime in Syria were the enemies of the United States.
Yeah.
You have a golden opportunity to turn that into an asset. Would you say no? You are a pro-business president, Mr. Trump. You have a golden opportunity to open up a new market for American companies.
Yeah.
Are you going to turn away from that opportunity? At least give it a shot.
Sure.
So I believe that's how the conversation happened. And where Saudi Arabia is significant is, look, we now have a very good relationship with Qatar. We now have a very good relationship with Turkey. We have a working relationship with Iran. We have trust with Russia. And, we can talk to all of these people to ensure that there's a minimum level of guarantees when it comes to dealing with the current regime.
With Syria, yeah.
And, if anything goes wrong, you can come and talk to us. We'll see what we can do it. If I was President Trump, I would say, why not? I imagine this is how the conversation happened. And this is how Saudi diplomacy works in terms of value creation, because the humanitarian aspect is, of course, important. And I believe it's the top priority for us as, to quote Stan Lee, with great powers comes great responsibility. Syrians are not Saudis, but they are our neighbors. And they are fellow Arabs. And we should do what we can to help them. But also, you should speak the language of the person you're negotiating with. And I believe that's somewhat what happened during that conference.
So the role that you described Saudi Arabia playing on Syria is one that it plays on many different conflicts and things like this. Trump came into office the second time, and his top officials came to people forget this, came to Saudi Arabia to try to mediate on Russia and Ukraine. Remember this. And we just had a previous episode with Richard Fontaine from the Center for New American Security. We talked about his recent report on swing states, global swing states. He called Saudi Arabia a swing state, one that actually has good relations between some of the great powers, wants to maintain those good relations. And his argument is that we should actually build sort of even better working relations with countries like Saudi Arabia in this new era of geopolitics, because you're working assertively to advance your own interests. And it's better, rather than to try to isolate or condemn or shape in different ways, is to work together as partners.
100%.
Yeah.
And look, it's a very delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to maintain a very good relationship with the United States and a very good relationship with countries like China and Russia.
Yeah.
And I understand why some policymakers or think tankers or analysts in the United States might be skeptical or even concerned. But, we only have the evidence to support. We can talk theory as much as you like, but the evidence is those relationships have come to the rescue or the benefit of the United States. The relationship Saudi Arabia enjoys with Russia meant that early on in the war, Saudi Arabia was able to leverage that relationship to secure the release of American prisoners and guarantee the prisoner swap.
Yeah.
That relationship meant that when I was in Moscow last year for the BRICS summit and I managed to interview Putin, I asked him whether he would accept to come to Saudi Arabia and negotiate a peace deal with Ukraine if the Saudis were brokering it. And his response was, look, we trust that everything the Saudis do is sincere, and I have a lot of respect for the king and the crown prince. Of course, he then went on but to say that depends on the Ukrainians and what they're willing to accept. And he mentioned that President Zelensky, which is true, has legislated that Ukraine cannot negotiate with Russia as long as Putin is president. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
But my point is, you can say what you want about President Putin, but he wouldn't have to say something like this if he didn't genuinely mean it.
Right, yeah.
And we know that the Saudis have the Russians' ear, and there's the whole OPEC Plus relationship to think.
Of course, yeah.
Not many countries in the world can say they have the ear of the president of Moscow and that of Russia, and that the Russians trust what they do as sincere. Most countries are either in this camp or in that camp.
And you're a swing state.
Yes.
So, but let's reel it back into this visit. What were the biggest outcomes, the things that you think were the biggest things? And then what are the things that we really need to work on? I mean, we had F-35s, but there's some, I think, long process and probably quite a long process. Civilian nuclear energy, again, seems to me, from my vantage point, at least it's still on the agenda, but it's not a clear pathway yet, a full 1, 2, 3 agreement or other things. But what were the biggest outcomes, and then where do you see more work that needs to be done?
So I think it's, as I described it in the article, it's almost like a revival or a renewal of the vows. It's a software update, if you want, of how this relationship can be significant for the next 80 years. So
this is like when I took my wife to Vegas last year and we renewed our vows with Elvis. This is what you're saying.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but what happens in the White House, it broadcasts on every network there is. And what people have seen during this visit is a huge amount of personal chemistry between the president and the crown prince.
For sure.
But that's not what's important, because presidents come and go. What is important is that everything that has been discussed is something that is significant and applicable to whoever becomes president next, or the upcoming presidents for the next 80 years, because artificial intelligence isn't going away. It's only going to become more important.
Yeah.
Diversification of our economy is not going to go away. We're going to continue working together on doing it. And I think the most important thing is it was an opportunity for the American public and American lawmakers to experience firsthand what a new Saudi Arabia looks like, what the future king of Saudi Arabia will think like. I think it's very significant or important to mention that while presidents come and go, we're looking at somebody who at least will be the king of Saudi Arabia for the next 50 years. Whenever that happens.
Yeah.
So it's very important for lawmakers, for stakeholders to know who are they dealing with. And I think what they've seen is somebody who is young, dynamic, surrounded by top-notch officials, decision makers, subject matter experts, and who has honored the 80-year relationship by, saying, you know what, if your slogan is America first, we're here to say, yes, America first, but it's not America only. We have this blueprint, we have this plan of diversification.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, we're going ahead with it, whether it's with the United States or not, but our partner of choice is the United States. Now it's on you. And, here are all our cards. Everything is transparent. Now it's on you whether you want to take part of it and benefit or not.
So where was the biggest breakthrough moment, though? Because a lot on the agenda, and then where, again, back to the other question, is where do we need a lot more work? It seems to me like, again, symbolically very important for the Crown Prince and for Trump, because his strategy on the Middle East, I think, is predicated on a strong partnership between Saudi Arabia and the United States. But my take on answering my own question here is some more progress on clarifying what sort of investment Saudi Arabia will make in the U.S. It went from $600 billion to $1 trillion. We'll see how those numbers add up. But artificial intelligence, high-tech cooperation, a marker thrown down on F-35s, which, again, I think this is a longer discussion in the United States because of the concerns Israel will have about qualitative military edge, the concerns that some will have about China getting access to technology. So I felt like it was mostly a very favorable visit, but sort of like more of a to-do list for the next couple of years to deepen our work and relationship, and a lot more work ahead.
Well, look, I will get to all of that, but you ask an important question: what is next, or what needs to be done?
Yeah,
and I think, look, this was almost like a show. It was almost like a reintroductory visit. Now people need to download the latest updates. And I honestly think this is not just an American problem, but most countries in the world that I've been to, people don't seem to have downloaded the latest update or understand the realities of the new Middle East, which, by coincidence or by design, Saudi Arabia is playing a major role in. People are used to a divided Middle East. People are used to a multipolar Middle East where, conflicting agendas are working. People are used to Saudi Arabia and Iran not talking to each other and working aggressively towards each other. As I said earlier, we now have a working relationship.
Yeah.
The relationship with Turkey has improved quite a lot. Inter-GCC relations, while there always be difference of opinions, but it's far better than it was only a few years ago since the Al-Ula declaration that happened recently. So I think the biggest homework or the biggest thing that needs to be done by U.S. policymakers and think tankers, etc., is to understand the new realities of the Middle East.
Right.
And the new reality is of the Middle East, as stated by the Crown Prince, is we want this to become the new Europe. By the new Europe, we mean an integrated region that puts prosperity and the economy first. For that to happen, we need to put out fires. We need to reduce tensions, conflicts, and wars to a bare minimum. This is why we see Saudi Arabia embodied in the Crown Prince, of course, but also our very dynamic Foreign Minister, Prince Faisal, touring the world, trying to secure as many buy-ins for a two-state solution,
right?
Which we see as the only viable.
Yeah, we'll talk about
option.
that in a second.
But we also see, again, with great powers, great responsibilities. We don't have to do this, but we are using this leverage. We're using this access that we have to the president of the world's biggest superpower to try and do good, to try and end wars in the region, to try to make sure that the new president in Syria has tools to work with, that we can pull out or pull up the Syrian people from their misery. We can hopefully end the conflict in Sudan. Part of it, as I said, is humanitarian. Part of it is strategic. Because, it's an illusion to think that you can thrive alone.
Yeah.
You cannot, when God says, love thy neighbor, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And, you need to wish for your neighbor what you wish for yourself.
Right.
And in this case, we wish all our neighbors peace and prosperity.
Yeah. So let's move beyond the visit. We talked about the visit. I want to ask your view as a thought leader, as someone who writes about Saudi policy and about the region, but observes U.S. politics quite a lot too. You're here. You were here with the Crown Prince on the visit, front row seat. A number of things happened just this week and in the past few weeks. And I'm curious just to hear your candid take, your personal take, not your publications, on the current state of play in U.S. politics. So the day that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's meeting Donald Trump, there's a big vote in Congress on what? The Jeffrey Epstein files. How does someone of your generation, how do your friends, how do people talk about this? How do you look at the fact that there was a government shutdown for more than a month here in the United States, and this partisan division and things like this on many issues, every single issue, including Saudi Arabia, which we'll get to in a second. How do you see this? Like, how do you interpret this? Do you worry about the pendulum swings between Democrats and Republicans and things like this?
Well, look, the short answer is yes, but let me give you the long answer. And you've asked me to be honest, so I'll be honest.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a huge concern, me personally, but a lot of people as well in the region, about the state of democracies. And this is not a criticism of democracies. It's a fantastic system, maybe the best system when it works. But the problem is it's not working. And it's something perhaps that Fareed Zakaria has alluded to and written extensively in his very big book, The Age of Revolution.
Yes, yeah, great book.
It's a great book. And, I had the privilege of debating him at the Riyadh Book Fair last year. And, to summarize, in democracies, they used to be, the division used to be mainly between the left and the right, in the conservatives and labor, or Democrats and Republicans, about economical policy. Do we want big spending? We want a bigger role for the government or a bigger role for the private sector? And usually, negotiations or compromises meant, agreeing on a certain tax bracket or a certain amount spent, and that was the end of it. Now we are seeing the divisions deepen and go towards topics where there could be no middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you either believe there are male and female, and those are the two genders, or if you believe there are 70 or 90 genders, there is no middle ground. We can't just agree.
70 genders?
Well, I mean,
okay.
whatever whatever the argument is, you can't compromise on that. You can't say, well, you know what, let's settle at 50.
It's like a religious argument almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but that creates real tensions.
Mm-hmm.
Tensions mean that you end up in a situation where there's paralysis.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the government shutdown in the United States. Both you and the Lebanese should forgive me, but this is something that we expect to see in Lebanon, not in the United States.
Yeah, and I heard even in advance of the Crown Prince's visit, there was some concerns about whether it would have to be rescheduled because some of the people that were furloughed in the government and some of the things that they wanted to get done on this visit, again, it went forward, fortunately, but some of the things that were shut down and part of the rancor, this was a product of our own sort of divisions, and we may not have moved forward with these sorts of things. We did, and hopefully we'll move forward and not have another shutdown. Yeah. Do you worry? You've seen some of the debate that have come out about the Trump family business itself in Saudi Arabia, Live Golf, the real estate projects, all of this, and looking at those divisions in a democracy like ours, and the concerns expressed by Democrats in Congress. And again, it's not your system; it's our problem, and it's our issue. But do you worry that Saudi Arabia is becoming once again, like it did in the first Trump term, a partisan wedge issue, where Saudi Arabia is like a red state and Israel's a red state, Iran's a blue state, the Democrats, leaning in this sort of favor? Do you worry that even the perception of this visit and how closely Trump and Mohammed bin Salman seem to admire each other could create antibodies in the political system here and cause a lot of negativity to this bigger project that we've been talking about?
Two things, to that point. First of all, I think this is an American issue. Again, the United States, at least from afar, was seen as the not the cradle, but the epitome of separation of powers. So up until now, everybody fully trusts the American system, and that, if there's something wrong, they will highlight it.
Yeah.
Until now, it's everything we've heard has been hearsay. It's been, media reports. There is no smoking gun there. And
you're talking about like the recent New York Times report on Daria and the Trump family business and other.
No, look, there is no doubt that the Trump family business are doing business in Saudi Arabia. The question is, does that implicate Trump himself to say that he is biased because of those relationships? And he's clearly said that, I've exited the family business. It's run by my sons, and, they have a right to pursue their interests. What bothers me is the same newspapers you mentioned, etc., weren't as aggressive following Hunter Biden's interests in Ukraine, for example.
Yeah.
This is the kind of selectiveness that is really annoying. And, it's either separation of church and state, either, you have to declare your interests and,
right.
You go after everybody. But you just don't go after the person you don't like because of the mere fact that you don't like him, or because he's from a party or represents a movement that you are not aligned with. I think this is the part that is really annoying. It's sort of the picking and choosing of where who you go after. And the other thing is, it's also sort of belittles or undermines the Saudi ability to read these things. I mean, it's almost as if you're thinking that, Saudi Arabian decision making is so shallow.
Yeah.
That, you know what, we will write a check and we'll solve our problems.
Yeah. So
It isn't like that.
Yeah, but
and you heard the Crown Prince say it in the White House when he raised the amount from 600 billion to 1 trillion.
Yeah.
He clearly said, this is not a gift to the United States. We have a vision that is out there. There's a whole document that explains what we are doing in terms of diversifying the economy. And it goes from space exploration down to mining in the ground.
Yeah.
And these things are happening with or without U.S. companies. And the money has been allocated. Part of it's coming from the government. Part of it is coming from the private sector. There is an RFP process, but also there's an understanding that, there is a superiority when it comes to American tech, for example, to American defense or military equipment. And there has been incidents before when you guys, or when I say you guys, Americans took too long, we went with the competitor. And then, Americans complained.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want us to do? Not have 5G for our citizens because you are taking your sweet time? No.
Yeah.
We need to get 5G because we believe our citizens need the latest technology. If you're not going to give it to us, we'll get it from somebody else.
Yeah. But you would agree there's a certain concern and insecurity on the part of people, Democrats especially, about this relationship that some, and again, it's not my view necessarily, but there's a perception that Saudi Arabia prefers Republicans, loves Donald Trump a lot more. He was greeted more warmly than Obama was. I think it takes two to tango. You and I think, talked about this, and some of our colleagues at the Wadi Forum that MEI used to do or have been doing with our Saudi friends, where I think there needs to be a lot of Obama trauma therapy for Saudis who look back on this 2013, 2016 period, which was actually quite tumultuous. Gaps on Syria policy, gaps on Iran and the nuclear deal. Back then, Saudi Arabia's official position was essentially Iran is like Nazi Germany and the big threat. That was then. This is now. As you said, you have a working relationship with the same leaders that are still in power in Tehran. Things change. But you would agree that there's a certain perception. Another example of this was in 2022, a month before the midterm elections here. There was a decision on oil prices that I think was misread by a lot of the Democrats. It was, as I understood it, based on market fundamentals with OPEC Plus to actually cut the supply. But it was viewed, the insecurity viewed in members of Congress and certainly some in the Biden administration, that you were trying, not you, but Saudi Arabia was trying to put their finger on the scale in our politics. You think that's a misread, right?
Well, I mean, it's a misread because oil prices actually went down.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was nothing there. But yes, I mean, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of talk. But, facts are stubborn things, right? Facts speak for themselves. People can speculate all they want, but the reality is what the reality is. We did not cut oil production because clearly there are oil experts, given we have our status as one of the most important, if not the most important country when it comes to the energy markets. There are economists and there are experts who determine these things. And if they say we don't need to cut production, that means there's a very good reason we don't need to cut production.
Yeah.
Most likely they were not perceiving that it is needed and that they saw that the oil prices are going to come down by themselves, which they did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hearsay, but I refuse the notion that we work better with Republicans than Democrats. FDR was a Democrat. Yes, there has been ups and downs in relationships with both parties. The Obama era was specifically unique because it started off on a very good foot, but
right.
ended up in a disaster for both
Because you had the Arab Spring, you had the Syrian civil war, you had the Iran nuclear deal, and the fact that the perception was in the region that Americans didn't talk to our regional partners about this.
And when they did, they didn't listen.
Uh-huh.
And, there's only so much you can do with a friend that is refusing to listen to your advice. But, the position was, look, we are living in this region. We are neighbors, and we're telling you that what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a deal, don't have a nuclear deal with sunset clause and the Iranians determining where you can and you cannot look for equipment.
Right.
I mean, it's when you look at the facts, you laugh. It's laughable that we even needed to give that advice, and it's that makes you laugh. But what makes you cry is that advice wasn't listened to.
Yeah.
I mean, on what planet do you need to be living when somebody tells you, like, we are concerned that Iran might be developing a nuclear program, and somebody is advising you to say, yes, we are concerned too, and if you're insisting to have a nuclear deal, probably you should not allow them to tell you where you can and not search, and that you shouldn't have sunset clauses.
Yeah.
It's as basic as that. But at the end of the day, you can take the horse to the water. You cannot force the horse to drink.
So we're running out of time here, having a great discussion here. But let's pick up from where you just left off on Iran and two of the regional issues and do it more quickly. That was then, 2016 to 2018. Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. This is now, 2025. Where do you see the file of Iran? You mentioned earlier that you have a good working relationship. Again, my perception, I think the reality is it's a transformation in Saudi's position. Saudi Arabia was very hawkish and hinting at the need for military action, back in 2016-17, that this deal won't work, though it went along with the deal. Now it's very much, we've got to de-escalate. And I think having suffered attacks on its own territory, Abqaiq, other places, during that period of maximum pressure, 1.0 of Trump, Saudi Arabia suffered some of the consequences of that insecurity. Now Iran is at its weakest point, I think, since it acquired the revolution in 1979. What's the pathway forward on Iran?
So a bit of context there. So the Beijing Declaration, which happened about 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2023.
Yeah.
Spring. Yeah.
We realized we're not going to get anywhere with this Cold War happening with Iran. Iran has its proxies. It's somebody who is a boxer, as in they will only punch above the waist and wear gloves, versus somebody that does MMA and has no boundaries.
Which you have in Saudi Arabia too, at MMA, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We don't play it ourselves, but I'm talking between countries.
Yeah.
So somebody who wears gloves and will only punch above the weight versus somebody who will do anything to win. Somebody who has something to lose, somebody who's eyeing 2030, and somebody who's stuck in 1979. So the conclusion was, to live and let live. The Chinese, I imagine the conversation would have went like this, saying, China is the country that has the most leverage over Iran. It's one of its few countries, friends in the world. And, we have a very good relationship with China. China agreed to be the mediator and the guarantor of this relationship. And while it's not perfect, it has secured the bare minimum required, which is to live and let live. No hostility, no attacks from that directly or through other parties.
Yeah.
And it opened up dialogue again. Now, what the future holds, I don't know, but I think we're in a very good position, given what President Trump said in the Oval Office, that he's open to talk to Iran. For Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia wants to play that role, to become a mediator or a back channel partner, I think there is room to maneuver. I think there could be a deal reached, particularly with a president like Trump.
Yeah, I hope that happens or something happens, because my take is on the 12-day war in June. It did damage to Iran's nuclear facility, but the Iranian regime still is deeply uncertain about where it's going.
100%.
And I actually think the role that Oman played in the run-up to that war was very important. And that I think one thing that's been missing from U.S. policy is, and I wrote a paper about this in January, is that we actually need a regional partnership, a diplomatic partnership to engage Iran. That, yes, it was fine to do the P5+1 in that period, but there wasn't much of a conversation. And countries like yours, like the UAE, like Oman, you all have slightly different views, but you all don't want to see a nuclear arms race in your part of the world.
Nobody wins,
Yeah.
and everybody loses, and we need to de-escalate in the region and give peace a chance, not the opposite.
Last but not least, when will Saudi Arabia have its normalization accord with Israel? What's your date? Look into your crystal ball, your magic 8 ball, shake it up if you've got it. How soon is this going to happen? President Trump clearly wants it as soon as possible. He clearly wants that Nobel Peace Prize. What's your prediction, Faisal Abbas, on when Saudi, not if, because I think it'll happen. It's an eventuality, but when?
I mean, look, first of all, let's start with the Nobel Peace Prize. I think Trump should have won it this year.
Why?
Well, because of the wars he tried to stop or successfully stopped. We're talking about Pakistan and India. We're talking about what he's done, the ceasefire that he managed to achieve in Gaza. It's on shaky grounds, but at least I think he's more deserving than Obama, who won it a few months into his presidency without having to do anything.
What about the bombing of alleged drug boats and
that would have happened after he won the Peace Prize. To be fair,
or Venezuela?
But
I don't think he's ever hit that Peace Prize, but we'll see.
That's not to me. But what I'm saying is, the cherry picking there. So Obama got it without having to do anything.
Yeah, he wasn't George W. Bush.
Well, there you go. Look, the normalization question is very important, and as much as I know that this position has been repeated, I don't think it's been repeated enough.
Yeah.
I have to state it very clearly again to your viewers and listeners. Saudi Arabia's position has always been that there's no ideological problem with Israel being a Jewish state, and we are a Muslim Sunni state.
Right.
The problem with Israel is the illegal occupation of Palestinian land as per the United Nations. Uh-huh. So in that context, all the Saudi peace initiatives and, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman offer, which is normalization with Israel in exchange for a pathway to a Palestinian state, or indeed a Palestinian state, is a reiteration or a reincarnation of King Abdullah's Arab Peace Initiative, which was launched in Beirut, became an Arab initiative
23 years ago.
It's a reincarnation of what King Fahd tried to propose in Fas. What I'm trying to say is that there has been consistency in the Saudi position. So the moment that an Israeli president or an Israeli prime minister is courageous enough to acknowledge the right of Palestinians to have a state, to sign a binding document that either grants that state or grants a credible pathway, irreversible to that state, is the moment Saudi Arabia will start talking about normalizing ties with Israel. Because, as I said, we have no ideological problem with the state of Israel, but we will not normalize ties with Israel as on the expense or at the expense of Palestinians.
So everything Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said in September of 2023, before October, because it was a big hint, big things are coming and all of this. What you're saying from your perspective now in 2025 is that we'll start that conversation, that it's not just we're not going to be so easy to give this away, that we have our own considerations.
No, but even back then, even that Fox News interview, it was still conditional. However, the Israeli side being more lenient or accepting of a Palestinian state was a lot more likely back then. Uh-huh. All the opinion polls, forget the government, all the opinion polls from Israel show that the Israeli people now are less accepting of...
70% oppose a two-state.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that is a challenge that the Israelis, and hopefully with some advice and pressure from the Americans, need to overcome. Because the only way to safeguard Israeli security is by ending the problem that that started it from the beginning, which is a two-state solution. Now, people come to me and say, it's very easy to say, very hard to implement. What about, the settlements? What about the wall of separation? What about Israeli security? And you know what I say? I say, thank you. Nobody ever said peace was easy. So, but there needs to be a starting point, and the Israeli government needs to acknowledge the right of Palestinians to have a state for us to begin to have that conversation.
Yeah, in that I agree. And I think I'd love to have you on another episode to talk about in greater detail about it, because there's a lot of interest. From time to time, you and I chat on WhatsApp, or Israelis come to me and say, hey, can you connect me with someone like Faisal Abbas? We want to do something or write a piece, and you publish some of these things and things like that. And I think it's worthy, because it's not going away. I think it's going to happen eventually, but it's under which conditions and things like that.
I think at the moment they need to connect with Mahmoud Abbas before they connect with me, and acknowledge that he's the president of the Palestinian Authority, empower him a little bit, and maybe that will help a little bit.
There you go. So we're about out of time. I want to use the last couple of minutes very briefly to ask you a question I ask all of my guests, and it's for future generations. Number one, what was the spark that got you into this line of work? What guided you here to this moment where you're the editor-in-chief of a leading publication in Saudi Arabia, a key opinion former in your country?
Look, I am lucky enough, and I there's not a day that I don't thank God that I have. Whereas I don't have many of the things other people might have, the only thing I've always had is I've always knew what I wanted to be. Ever since I can remember, as in 8 or 9 years old, I was producing magazines, very amateurly, but
I want to see those.
I think my mom has kept them and it uses them to blackmail me.
Parents do that.
Yes, at some point. But I've always had passion, and I've always enjoyed, and until this day, work doesn't feel like work for me. It's the feeling a pianist feels when they play the piano.
Yeah.
Putting a newspaper together, writing a story, changing the headline almost feels like a second nature to me. And I realize not many people can talk that way about their job. So
Right.
I am very blessed. I am thankful to God. I'm thankful for every moment that I've spent. Mind you, it's not a walk in the park. It comes with its challenges. It comes with its responsibilities, and it comes with lawsuits. It comes with a huge, I wouldn't say haters, but there are many people who are not a fan of what we write or what we do, etc. So it's a combination of pluses and minuses. But I am very lucky that I am doing something that I enjoy, and I'm very lucky that it came to me naturally.
Yeah, well, the haters are going to hate, as one philosopher once said. If there's someone listening out there in Saudi Arabia, and I hope they are, a young person at a university or a young professional who wants to follow in your footsteps, they're 20 years behind you, what would you say they need to do?
Well, look, first thing they need to realize is nothing comes easy. It's, unless you are fortunate that you come from a wealthy family and you're just going to inherit money, those are a small minority in the world. Everybody else has to work hard to earn their living and to carve out their career. And the other thing is, once you've carved out your career and earned your living, you now need to work harder.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge, or the biggest, especially people who work in media, it's very easy to go on an ego trip. And that is usually the beginning of the end. You need to remain humble. You need to keep your feet on the ground and realize you are one mistake away from a scandal. And there are some of the biggest names in our industry who have been burnt. The person that comes to mind is a legend like Dan Rather. All his career did not protect him from a slip towards the end. I don't say this in criticism. I'm saying, you need to do every step of verification. Never think that something is beneath you, and you need to do that day in and day out until you retire.
Yeah. So as the late, great Casey Kasem, Arab-American disc jockey, would say, keep your feet on the ground and reach for the stars. But as you would add, stay on your toes.
Absolutely.
Be diligent. Faisal, I had so much fun in this conversation. Can we actually come to Saudi Arabia and repeat it and bring the crew with us next time?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do that in 2026. Let's make a vow to do that.
You were right at the beginning when you said it's going to pass by quickly.
Yeah. We ran out of time here, and I'm sorry for that, but I want to thank you again for joining us and for covering the full landscape here. That's all the time that we have for this week. And again, thanks to our listeners for tuning in and to our colleagues for their work on this week's episode. You can follow MEI on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and subscribe to our email newsletters for the latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Brian Catoulis. We'll see you all soon.